John Healy, how's the car? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm safe in the car, though. I was just told to move. I suddenly had a forklift sitting next to the car telling me I had to leave.
That's funny. That's funny.
So I found a new parking spot. Well, I think we got a lot of fresh people on the line today from what I'm seeing, or some people who have come back. It'd be great if anyone who's new onto the call took a couple minutes and just tell us who you are, drop your name into the or your LinkedIn profile into the chat so that everyone understands who's here.
Yeah, if you're new, raise your hand and we'll call on you to just give a 30-second, 1-minute intro and say hi to everyone. All right, first up, Elizabeth. Oh, you're on mute. There we go.
You never learn. Hi, everyone. I'm brand new. This is day one, and I'm really glad to be here. And so I am the founder and CEO of a company called Results Resourcing, and we are the freelance job platform that comes with your own recruiter. So I'm the designer and co-developer of this platform that functions like many other really large platforms out there, but we've also integrated access to human beings. So the system does all the process work, but the humans do the brain work to help small and mid-sized businesses define their goals, and then we help them find the freelancers that meet those needs and we're kind of matchmakers in a way. So that's what we do for a living, and very keen on the transformation of work and glad to be here today. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and drop your info into the chat. Kevin, next.
Hi, I'm also brand new. It's great to meet you all. I'm co-founder and COO of a company called Be Remote. And we help companies that are trying to navigate this world of being permanently remote or permanently hybrid. We have a standalone platform that's on the web and also in Android and Apple's app stores. We're fully integrated into Microsoft Teams, and we're starting to integrate into Ring Central and into Zoom. And really our goal is to drive employee engagement and improve collaboration and retention. It's great to meet you all.
All right, thanks for being here. Maria.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This is my first time here. Very excited to be part of this. I was introduced to the group by a colleague. I currently work with the Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development, and the research I do there focuses on the transformation of work, specifically related to the pharma industry. And separately, I also started a consulting practice, and so I'm solo in that sort of environment, and it's very interesting to be with a group here of like-minded people. Thanks.
All right, welcome, Glenn. Oh, you're on mute, Glenn.
Yep, there we go. Well, a few new faces. Few old faces on here as well, so it's fantastic to be part of this group. Glenn Hodgson here from Stockholm, Sweden. Basically two main roles here, running the think tank Free Trade Europa, but also the founder of Freelance Movement. Started out in Scandinavia, now it's the Northern Europe's biggest group for the platform, gig and freelance economy. So basically we're banging the drum about the future of work, freelance revolution, and the importance of companies and organizations to have a freelance strategy, as well as looking at the policy and the legislation side of things as well. So enough to keep us busy, and fantastic to be introduced to this group, and hopefully be the first of many meetings. So good to meet you all. I'll put my details on the chat below. Thanks indeed.
All right, welcome. Nidhi, you're next.
Hi everyone, I'm Nidhi, and I work with Team Magenta. My team, Mark and Ritika, here as well. So we are into multidisciplinary creative work. We do a lot of B2B communications, and I'm very excited to be here. I'll drop in my LinkedIn profile, so it'll be good to connect with everyone.
All right. John Healy, you want to do or Barry and John Windsor, any updates from you guys?
I'm a little jet lagged, so I slept a little bit last night, but I'm a little foggy. Now it's just great to be here in person. You know, I think in this new world of work, you get so acculturated to being remote and doing that, but it's just really great to kind of see eye to eye. And I think, you know, we've got to get that going for the group as well, as find the place and the time to bring everybody together, because it's been a, you know, long virtual journey. And I think the future is both, right? The future is hybrid.
Yeah.
At the end, the one thing I'd say is check out the latest podcast we've done. We've done quite a few podcasts recently, actually. I think, John, you've done two in the last 2 weeks, right? But Ellen and I did one with Albert, the chief exec of Underpinned yesterday, which was super interesting. We've trained 50,000 freelancers, helping people turn their passions into businesses. And it was super, it's one of the really—
He's a legend. He's
really
an absolute legend, that guy.
Legend. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Ballet dancer turned chief exec. Ballet dancer turned
as I am myself. As I am myself, Barry. Hey, we actually meet up with him next week 2 weeks in London.
Yeah, you and I and John Younger and yeah. So,
yeah.
Check out that
Rogues
episode.
Gallery.
Really good one. Yeah, a Rogues Gallery, exactly.
Very, very good. Well, I think we had put out, Brandon, this week that we're going to have Jin take us through a little bit of the Lish report. Lish had come out with their annual report, and Lish has meant so much to this organization, this community coming together and pulling together all the case studies and the stories, kind of validating what's gone on, particularly with the folks at NASA and some of our other members. But Jin, we want to maybe turn it over to you, and I think Mark Canott might challenge you with a few questions along the way too.
Hey, John, let me just kick off, because I think it's important. So, you know, Jin and I got to know each other because of the work that Kareem did on the case study on Victors and Spoils. But I think, you know, the seminal moment for this community was at the Crowd Academy back in 2018, when Kareem and Jin were nice enough to put on this event that brought together the 100, you know, top folks, not only academic, but also demand side and platforms. And it, you know, for Diane and Balaji and Steve Rader and myself, it was one of those moments, and for Jin and Kareem, I think it was one of the moments that we all been doing this work separately in our own little places for so long. And I got to include Mike Morris in there too, because he was one of the OGs. But it was just one of those seminal moments. It was like, wait a second, you're doing that and you have those problems, and let's start talking. And this whole group started because Diane and Balaji and Steve and Jin and I started having this weekly conversation just to keep each other on, you know, up to date on what was happening in the industry. And here we are today. Things have changed a lot. It's grown so much. We have so many awesome partners. It's just so great to see so many new people here that are going to bring so much value to the group. So really, really grateful for this. But I think it's really great to kind of reflect back to where things started and get an update on where Lish is and what Lish is doing, because Jin's been driving a lot of amazing innovation with his partner, Kareem Lakhani. So take it away, Jin.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thank you all. A lot of certainly familiar faces and new faces. So excited to be here with you. Sorry, I'm not always here, but I always hear great things about what's going on with OA and CTW. Before I get started, because I know Stephen on my team is going to be jumping in, and also Mark, do you guys want to introduce yourself? And then as we go, I'll sort of, you know, cold call and so forth. But Stephen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. Stephen Randazzo, one of the associate directors at Lish. I've been with the lab almost 5 years at this point, primarily working on managing and doing research on open innovation and the application and adoption of artificial intelligence. So thanks for having me.
Great. And then Mark, if you would, because Magenta was huge in putting this together for us.
Yeah, thanks, Jin, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you all are. My name's Mark Cannant, and I'm the co-founder of a business called Team Magenta. I actually live in Mumbai, and I've got two of my colleagues, Nidhi, who just introduced herself, and Ritika. And I will also, if the opportunity presents, draw them into this conversation, because the reality is that they are the ones that do the heavy lifting and all of the work. But we've had a lot of fun over the last few months working with Jin and Stephen and the team at Lish in order to put together this review, and we're excited to be able to walk you through it.
Great, wonderful. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Stephen. I wanted to start a little differently rather than just go through the report again. You guys will have the link and you can check it out, and you can email us and so forth, or tweet and ask questions later. But I wanted to think about, because Lish to some degree is a bit of an accident, right? But it's worked out really well that we were able to, again, partner with organizations like NASA and Harvard Medical School, and just being able to be pioneers in open and of late, again, digital transformation. And as John and I have been trying to write this book as hard as we can every day for the last, I don't know, John, 9 months, we come across these reflection pieces. And one of the really interesting things that we saw, I wish I had a picture of it, I don't at the moment, but it was back around 1920, where if you think about people who go to work in the 20s, it was horse and buggy, right? Before the 20s, it was horse and buggy. And right around at the turn of the century, there's automobiles that are driving in New York City. And one of the things that people got really scared because it's really loud and they're not used to an engine being on the street and so forth. So one of the things they did was they would put replica horse heads, which eventually became the hood ornament, right on top of the in the front, so that people can sort of orient themselves. And I say that to say this about Lish, is that we've been just a small work that we've done really get at the cutting edge of thinking about innovation and how that works, right? So how do we incentivize people? How do we group people? How do we organize them? And such is the case that we've been able to deploy this at NASA and other organizations, as well as we think deeper about convening mechanisms, contest, community, and then eventually, again, this paradigm of where do you get solutions and where do you get solvers, right? That's what it really comes down to, and who are those people that are doing that work? And it's been instrumental. In our reflection too, and I think we had Corinne, my colleague who I saw earlier, hey Corinne, HBS just celebrated 100 years of the case method, right? So we have case subjects here. Biology is a case subject on Pixel. Windsor, John's a case subject years ago on both Victors and Spoils and Unbox. And as we started thinking about this, and Kareem, really brought this home for me, was, 100 years ago, to think about bringing your a competitor company in, letting them in on all the insights, right? All the insights of how to organize, how to do operations, how to do a business model, and then sharing that knowledge within a classroom with your competitors, and also charging for it, which is what HBS does. But it's incredible to think about it, right? So we think of how competitive everything is and how difficult everything is, but that we were able to do that. And as we celebrated that 100-year anniversary of the case method, which is pretty global, and it's pretty amazing the way that it resonates in terms of a methodology. We're also turning a bit of a leaf here at Lish, right? So I'm hitting ahead at things to come a bit, and then I'll go backwards into what we've been able to accomplish. But we are launching the Digital Data and Design Institute at Harvard, which is again going to try to accelerate research, learning, lifelong learning, collaboration with companies. Collaborations, again, in designing ecosystems for the future, right? And work is a big part of that as well, along with technologies. And I say that to say this, that Lish has really helped pioneer a lot of that, right? So if we think of DQ, Data, Digital, and Design Institute being born, it's as a result of all these things we've been able to pilot and do at Lish very successfully. And we're quite proud of that work, right? Not a lot of academic labs can say, they've got to run 800 pieces of, open innovation projects over a course of 10 years. Not a lot of labs can say, we've invented and pioneered new ways that grants get funded and how collaboration happens. So we hope to do more of this at scale and hope to engage, again, parts of this community as we do that. And so with that in mind, I think I'm going to not hit everything here, but just a couple of the highlights of what we're focusing on. We'll get to this section as we go through this report. But it's really, the core of what we do is getting these kind of nerdy academic peer-reviewed papers, which takes some time, but we've actually gotten very good also at developing courses and getting things out there much quicker, including an open course that Stephen will talk about in a little bit. But our focus really going forward is this here, which is how do we, come up with a learning network that can connect both, people tied into HBS and around the university and globally, right? How can we sort of democratize this? An observatory where, we can have impact on company policymakers and governments, and how we can have more of an understanding of what's going on in real time. And learning and research accelerator where we work with companies much quicker. And then eventually down the road here, Startup Foundry, where the ideas that are being produced by people can then be accelerated to meet business needs as fast as we can do it. So that's a bit of a look ahead. What Lish has been in its start is, again, we started with NASA, and I don't know if Steve's here or not, but we started with some funding from NASA to run open innovation competitions and community gathering and research cooperation with medical school, and over the fullness of time, we've sort of grown this into a much bigger lab where we have close to 100 affiliates, and we have 25 people here that work day in and day out, kind of studying everything from water cooler effects to how do you have better R&D teams, and all the way to, again, the effects of what it means to pivot toward the future of what's going on in work, and thinking through that. So a couple of highlights. Again, I asked Mark's team to insert this. We did move into this beautiful 600,000 square foot building, new engineering building. And some of this is symbolic for us in saying that, look, we want to, as this part of campus, if you've been to HBS, it's been HBS forever, but the engineering school has now moved over. And we want to signal both the future here is bridging emerging technologies, digital technologies, all the research, the cutting edge stuff that's going to be happening in this building and elsewhere, along with the business intellect that we're going to need and the savvy research that we do. So we've had some discussions maybe of having a convening of this group somewhere in this building. So I think we'll get to that, but I'll let John and Barry and John Haley figure that kind of sort of stuff out. Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you because there's some interesting things here that you all have digested and really helped us with in terms of this unboxing. So could you spend maybe a couple minutes describing this with us?
I'm actually going to hand it over to Ritika because she was really the one that led the project from a
Even
design
better.
perspective.
Yeah.
Ritika has a master's degree in communications design, and this, what we came to call the Unbox, was really kind of central, I think, to the whole publication. So Ritika, do you want to just sort of talk us through the thinking behind it?
Yes, I will. Thanks, Jin. Thanks, Mark. So as we call it, the Unbox, it's basically a very powerful visual concept. It provides structure, and it recognizes the fact that the research that's done at Lish, it exists at the intersection of science, business, and society. And in terms of information architecture, we presented the readers with an overview of the stories and a click-through to explore additional research and data. We used a lot of complex and technical information, and we tried to make it as accessible as possible. So like you can see in the visual up on the screen, we've got AI and digital transformation researchers, emerging innovation, and science of innovation, all intersecting, and it's not necessarily linear. It keeps moving, and it's very agile.
Yeah, and so you then use those colors, right? So you then use those colors, am I right, in terms of then being able to organize the content as you go through? So the stuff about emerging innovation has that nice orange color. The stuff about AI and digital transformation is categorized with the aquamarine color.
Yes, it does. And as you move through the publication, you'll be able to move through sections very easily and be able to identify which story belongs under which bucket.
And one of the beauties of it is that there's an infinite number of things that you can do with that, right? So you never get tired of it. You never get bored as a designer. And I hope as a reader of it, you don't get bored. So back to you, Jin.
Yeah, and this is well captured in terms of like how we think about things. Again, we have research tracks at the lab. We have data science and AI. We have, open innovation and crowdsourcing. We have technology commercialization. We have science of science and studying how science gets produced. But they all sort of merge, and we didn't want this web look because that's distracting. And this is a big clean, but we do pick up and leave in areas that converge quite a bit. And so at the core of it, I think is a healthy appetite for innovation, both in the academic space, but with practical things that we're executing. A couple of highlights here, again, when it comes to emerging innovation. NASA had a tremendous 10-year anniversary, which is great. I recall being there when they launched it and so forth. So lots to do there in terms of both contest crowdsourcing stuff, but also emerging tech, and as Steve is sort of taking over and thinking about diffusing it even further in the organization, it was a good thing. By the way, our colleague Lee Bickel, who retired right after this, she's one of the few civil servants to win the NASA Distinguished Services Medal. So that just goes to show you those who are still thinking about, well, where is this all leading in terms of being innovative? That's usually given to technical experts, right? But in this case, we're very proud of the work we've been able to do with Lynn and Steve and that team. And so I think that's a representation of that. And this was a ceremonious occasion for that. Stephen, do you want to talk a little bit about open source? Because as far as I know, we're the only lab kind of in the world taking on this sort of work with Linux Foundation.
Yeah, sure. So we've had I think a 3-year partnership with the Linux Foundation, and the genesis of it was to study kind of 2 things. One, the infrastructure, just how much open source is out there, where is it being used, but specifically through the lens of security. And so with that, over the past 3 years, we now have 3 reports, but the report that's featured in this annual report is the contributor survey, where we surveyed over 1,000 people who contribute to open source in some way. And so that could be writing a single line of code that, and they hit, submit, or it could be building full-on packages that are used kind of all over the world, right? And the purpose of the survey was really to try to better understand the community, one thing is like what motivates them, right? So we found that, not surprisingly, the top 3 motivations are non-monetary, with people enjoying learning, fulfilling a need. You see your intrinsic and pro-social motivations, like we often see with contests, right? So nothing terribly surprising there. But the other side of it, though, was looking at the interaction between the communities and the organizations that are using open source, right? There's full-on organizations in government, in industry that have built their infrastructure on open source software. And so the question is like, what is the relationship between those contributing and the companies that are using it? And so that's really what the report starts to dig into a little bit. But it's an area that we're at the lab actually moving forward with a couple experiments to look at the value of the community as they contribute to the larger economy through open source. And that's like a major question. And so that's the exciting part about some of these more high-level industry reports is they've given us a foundation at the lab to then say, okay, this is kind of what we're seeing. We get to investigate at a high level. And then from there, say, okay, here are 3 questions that we want to dig into a little bit deeper. And through that, we're going kind of another layer down to understand the complex relationship between the community and the larger economy and what those contributions look like.
Thanks, Stephen. And also this is again, there's a part of the lab that does open source, software work, and And it's always amazing to me that so much is out there and yet so little is known about the community in and of itself. I think we're sort of better positioned in open talent communities, but still, you know, there are all these questions about certification, you know, skilling, training, and all that kind of stuff. And as I start to see us thinking about, look, we don't want to be, you know, 10, 20 years into this without knowing our communities well, right? Like, and so part of, I think, the struggle in some of the conversations here and the progress we've also made is, you know, how do we think about systematizing some of this sort of work for the open crowd as well, right? For open talent, and as more shifts toward that, and how can we, you know, work together? So we're hoping to springboard some of that again with the book and so forth. But I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned here. But also it's a really interesting model in open source that it really has diffused, you know, quite literally everywhere, and no one really questions where it comes from, right? And so, you know, we're doing the research backwards. I think in terms of research going forward on open talent, I think we're able to do it, you know, in conjunction and go forward with it, so we can capture the right amount of data and so forth. By the way, this kind of prompt from Linux Foundation to work with us came because our colleagues at Gov were like, we don't know what's going on in this space. Please figure it out. Like, try your best, kind of thing, right? And so we do get a lot of those requests, again, more from companies. But I do think this would be a good lesson learned for some of the other stuff that we might be doing going forward. Let me kind of get through this a bit quicker because I want to hit some interesting things. We do have a continual thing we're doing with National Academies on a prizes report that was delayed by COVID, but we are making some progress on that. That'll be good, like bedtime reading for you, those of you who like 300-page manuals. That'll be, I think, very, very interesting in terms of findings and so forth. We have done some coursework this year. Kareem ran this thing called Africa Live, and engaging folks, again, business leaders and so forth on ventures, very well attended. And then also our lab to market. This is technology, commercializing technology. We had over 100 participants in the first run of it, which is the second run, I should say. And it's a free course. You're more than welcome to take it as well. Then I'm going to turn it back over to Stephen, because this has been the bread and butter of his work since he's been here, and kind of his baby as well. And John and I did a little bit of filming around this. But Stephen, you want to walk us through the open course?
Yeah, sure. So the Open Innovation course is set to launch June 10th. You can register right now. I'm going to make a shameless plug. If you register before May 10th, you get 30% off. It's on Harvard Business online. And thank you. And it's a great course. I'm not just saying that because I had a heavy hand in it, but really it's the people that are have come with fundamental concepts around open innovation. So the course itself is six modules, where we start off with an overview of open innovation. Our friends at NASA are featured as a primary example of open innovation at scale. But then we start to walk through the different vectors of open innovation. So we start off after the opening, we talk about problem formulation, which is just, it really is a good module. And we have a couple of professors, one from NYU, one from Georgetown, to walk through problem formulation and the different approaches you can take to problem formulation. So it's like actual strategies and methods you can walk away with and put things to work. From there, we go through contests, we go through communities and labor markets. Then we wrap up with adoption and scaling, where we have John and Jin to talk about their framework for adoption in scaling. And Kareem, this is really based on the lab's work for the past 10 years, Kareem's work for the past I don't know, 15, because we kind of back into his dissertation at some point from NYU. We have Eric Von Hippel talk about user innovation in the community section. It's the course, the way we designed the course wasn't to live up in the theoretical clouds, but to really put these concepts and methods to work for your workforce. And this was really driven by a couple asks actually coming back out of government, where Tom Khalil, who was at OSTP during the Obama administration, and I was with the feds at that point as well, and at the Department of Health and Human Services, and we were doing open innovation as well. And the issue was pretty consistently, it's like, hey, let's use challenges, yet let's use open innovation. And everyone say, hey, that's great, but like, how the hell do you do it? So this is the way to do it. And that's where this course really came from. It's an amalgamation of needs, kind of the genesis in government, to all the research and work that Lish has done with both partners in government and in industry.
Awesome. I'm going to pause here. We got a few more things to run through, but I want to be sensitive to time. I know this is an hour long. We got 20 minutes. Anybody have questions or things for clarification? Because I think most of what we've described either directly pertains to your day-to-day or at least has some resonance in how you're thinking about it. So any questions? Sorry, I got that presenter mode on, so I can't see the whole Brady Bunch thing, but so just shout out.
Hey, Jin, love what you guys are doing. I guess I have a question. I mean, you know, we're Worksum's are very much a scale up. We build on Laravel, and loads of our code is open source. In corporate land, which real businesses or tech company, I guess technology first businesses, right? Can you give us some examples of businesses that are really embracing this? Corporates, you know.
In terms of open source or just open work?
Open innovation, yeah.
So I think a lot of people are embracing some concepts of it where they're building it internally. Because again, the way we think about open is not just outside in. There's also some internal innovation, whether that's marketplaces and or communities that are springing up with shared resources. So I think more of that's going on, and what we're seeing is people who are using these sort of advantages for both reskilling and upskilling. Right? We see less on the contest sort of work, largely because of some of the things that Stephen mentioned. That formulating problems and issues with IP, legal and compliance may get more difficult. It's no secret that everybody uses Gigforce, but nobody really likes to talk about it in detail. And so I think the companies that have some strategy around this, they do well and they do capture some better metrics. The ones who don't, I think, are still doing it, but doing it either in small pockets or in silos. And so it's less well known, right? We always sort of cite our NAS example because they were, when we started NTL, we had to sort of disclose data. They had to come up with ways to be able to say, this is working, this is not. But again, NASA is not a full sort of open talent economy either, in the sense that the groups that work there, they are looking for solution and idea-based things that are concentrated around rapid prototyping or ideas, and more importantly, access and resources rather than pools of labor, if I can put it that way. So it's all encompassing. I think there is more traction internally at the moment, but I think there's going to be more, especially as work starts to shift. Hopefully that answers your question. I see, Ashley, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. This is a great topic. Any recommendations for idea crowdsourcing platforms in particular? Untap Social has a couple projects on the smaller scale that we're looking to tap into a community for a contest related initiative, but they're not exactly complex projects at this stage. Any recommendations from you or the community?
I don't want to bias anybody by naming a specific colleague of ours, so That'll be John Windsor's problem. But listen, when it comes to the way I look at platforms is, when it comes to either internal or ideation or whatever, internal you'd have some capabilities, but the premise behind what we have studied and what we're trying to accomplish is that there are centers within, especially large organizations that are going to steer some of this and both have the know-how and the capability to execute, including, getting people on contract and all that kind of stuff. If you're a very small organization, you can experiment with many different types of platforms. But the sort of the skill that it requires to know these problems fit with these platforms, that's really a muscle that you build through the Center of Excellence. And I think that work will come through as if you choose to take the course. I think it'll be there, and then also through some of our stuff that John and I are trying to capture. John, do you want to say a thing or two about that? Just the COE model?
No, I think you got it covered, Jin. I mean, I think that's, obviously that's kind of proved out. I think in the research that we did, obviously, the great stuff that Kareem and Jin did, looking at NASA, and then that really important paper that you guys wrote. I don't know. Hey, Brandon, could you throw that paper up, or Jin or Steve, and that, the Jeff Davis, Kareem, Elizabeth, Jin paper, because I think that was really instrumental in us thinking about the stages in developing the strategy for open talent. It kind of harkens back. I think, what was it, 2018? You guys did that work?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That was great. And then obviously, we've done some great research and studies on Balaji's awesome work with Deloitte Pixel. And I think, from my perspective, I look at, Balaji, what you've done, at least in the early days, was really creating that kind of focal point inside Deloitte with Pixel and becoming the Center of Excellence model that was really, in my mind, is really an accelerant. And I think it proves out in the work that you've done and the momentum you've gotten, especially, as we documented in the case study. So maybe, I don't know, Brandon or somebody could put that case study up as well so people can take a look at that. I know it's pay gated because it's HBS case study, but it's really worthwhile looking at.
Great.
Back to you, Jim.
All right. So again, quickly going through some of the stuff, we do quite a bit in digital transformation with regard to data science and AI, sort of thinking through, excuse me, how to think about, again, disruption, but also disruption so that you're not, all of a sudden, Marriott and then there's an Airbnb, right? So if you read Competing in the Age of AI and sort of that digital collide that's happening everywhere, how do we think about that? A lot of this stuff is still related to open as well. So we've done some work here around ventilators, and Stephen's part of this work as well on thinking about innovation during constraints. Stephen, you want to say another thing on this as well? Because this is one of the key projects.
Yeah, I'm in the thick of writing the paper right now. So it's pretty interesting. What we did initially was, COVID hit and the ventilator problem, it seems so long ago, right? But in April 2020, everyone was like, oh my God, we need ventilators. And so at the time at the lab, we were like, well, how are people using open innovation to solve some of the problems associated with COVID-19? And so we did this big kind of environmental scan of what's going on. We decided to look at ventilators specifically because it's a fairly defined problem. It's like, there's a shortage, let's build something. And what that's evolved into is a 2-year case study on Mass General Hospital and the contest that they ran in 2020 called the COVID-19 Challenge. And with that, they used this contest to build working prototypes in 75 days, which is crazy because ventilator device development like that usually takes, 3 to 5 years to get it all the way through regulation. But given that there was, FDA had emergency use authority, everyone was sprinting towards that, right? Luckily, the shortage wasn't as bad as it ended up being, thank goodness. But what we've seen is that we're looking specifically at the finalists and semifinalists, so 7 different teams, and what their approaches were and how they operated within constraints associated that were set forth by crises, and also they added their own and the constraints that are associated with medical device development. And so it is this crazy complex web that they had to navigate in their device development process. And to wrap it up, I'll say, not surprisingly, no one had any backgrounds in medical device development, in ventilator development, a bunch of engineers, roboticists, heck, they weren't even in healthcare, and they managed to put together working prototypes in 75 days. And the 3 top teams, their devices were pretty close to going through regulatory review. Like they're really good machines, actually. And one of the projects has been working on it for the past 2 years. They kind of said, okay, let's keep going. And it's taken a good amount of time because 1, the device they're developing is like an ICU ventilator, but 2, their goal is to be the first open source medical device that is approved, full approval by the FDA. And they're getting pretty close. No one else has done that ever. And if they do it, they're setting some really great precedent in doing it. But that's kind of what the study is about.
Some other things that, again, we do some contest-based things, but also I do want to point you to this virtual water coolers chats, which goes through how one firm was thinking about sort of internship programs and how to increase digital interactions. And the findings are pretty interesting, as well as you think more about remote work and so forth. Speeding ahead here, again, we wrote a case on Commonwealth Bank on how data insights and real-time prediction for their frontline employees and how you can capture data across the organization, call centers, digital, and in branch, and thinking about it. So Combank does a really good job. Again, they're for being a large bank, Australia's largest bank, they do focus a lot on retail, which helps their sort of digital transformation goals be very crisp and clear. But really cool stuff that they're doing in terms of, I think they have 450 machine learning models on like 160 million, billion data points, and all sort of geared toward, things that a frontline person should be doing with a potential customer and selling relevant products, right? And so they're going beyond just the digital stuff and thinking more about, well, brick and mortar is still here in retail, right? So how do we think about it? So we did a cool project with them. We've done some other things again as well on experimenting with companies when it comes to the usage of data science and algorithms, right? So there's a lot of supply chain issues that we look at. There are things that we looked at. A colleague of ours, Dr. Tim DeStefano, was going to be going to Georgetown as a professor. He looked at working with a company a large provider, a large retail goods provider. They make purses and such. You can probably figure out which it is, but thinking about stock outages and can AI ML improve that? And we saw that there was a probability that was reduced by almost 30% just running experiments as we think about the architecture and so forth of how firms deploy this stuff. And then again, we have some stuff here about working from home. I just encourage you to check it out as we go and thinking about it, and then also sort of information sharing and delays in funding and so forth that I think are all things that we are, especially the folks here who are more in startup land, might be interested in taking a look at a little bit deeper, because it does get around sort of novelty, and then at the same time, what's risk, and how the risk averse can ultimately damage what you're going after. So these are scientific settings, but I think they do have some application to business. And then we have some neat people who have some spotlights here. So we just encourage you guys to read through their work and check it out. Again, diverse group of folks we have at the lab in terms of experience, and we have lots of doctoral level researchers. We also have master's level researchers. We've got staff and faculty, which kind of makes us pretty dynamic team that we've certainly enjoyed working with, and will continue to. And there's a lot we had to cut to give you a sense of what happens around here in Lish. Is we have a kid in a candy store problem where you walk into the candy store and you're like, I want to do this, and that, and sooner or later you end up with lots of projects. But on average, quarterly when we go through reviews and such, we have about 60 projects that we're constantly cutting and redefining. But some of these things go on for years and so forth. But it's all again at the intersection of digital and work. And I want to just encourage you all to check out our stuff here, and certainly use it to your advantage as well as you increase your knowledge and understanding of this work.
Great, Jen. Really appreciate you taking the team through that and giving a sense for what's there. I guess just a simple question maybe is, if people have projects or things that they think could be of interest for you guys, is there a protocol or an approach to reaching out to seeing whether or not they've got something that would be appropriate for you and Lish to take a deeper look at?
So we have kind of a simple protocol in the sense that, listen, anything's an idea and it's a good idea, we'd want to maybe look at it, but things don't always make it onto the project list because we are, in part grant chartered. We are, we do have some main things we need to tackle. So I would say if there's an interest in, 2 or 3 in the group here that have core questions, we can always try to make a link to one of our researchers who might want to study it with you, and take it from there to see if this will end up being like a full-fledged project. To give you a sense of like the easiest way that I've seen our folks interact is if you can provide access of data, that's usually like a home run, right? Like, you can take a look at us and we can give you data, agreements aside and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty much a home run in terms of a matching partner, but also, what is the problem that you're facing, right? And it's got to be kind of crisp. If we're still trying to figure out, well, this is a problem or this is not a problem, we're not going to have as much knowledge on that because we're not insider researchers in the sense of, we don't live in the organization or in the ecosystem you live in. And then as always, a bit of a caveat is there's got to be something academic that we can produce out of it, not just, like corporate research for the sake of doing that. And that seems to be, again, if data access and is there an academic thing we could produce, that's usually a pretty good like home run type thing for getting a project started.
Thanks. And I just want to take a moment and have a shout out to Mark Canant and Ritika and the team at Magenta for kind of taking a bunch of academic information and putting it into a document that is pretty exciting to read through and work through. So Mark, to you and your team, well done on that front. And what I love is just seeing the community work with each other and kind of lift each other up in different areas. So great to see that coming along. Mark, was there anything else you wanted to share? I know you've been working with Ashley on the communications work stream. Are there any kind of closing pieces of messaging we wanted to get out to the community?
I want to add one final piece on the report, if I may, which is that there's a community aspect to this, right? Which we would never have had the opportunity to work on this had John Windsor not introduced us to Jin, right? And we worked remotely. I think it's a great example of open talent in action. My colleague Nidhi really kind of coordinated it. Nidhi, do you want to just have a sort of final word on this?
Sure. The whole process while we worked on this project was collaborative. As Mark said, we were remote throughout. So we had to have a robust systems in place in terms of copy, approvals, and proofs. My colleague Ritika and I were in India, and Aditya, who handled the content, was in Ireland. So we had 3 time zones to work with. It required a strong team spirit, collaboration, and respect, I think, were the keys to our success. I want to give a big shout out to Jin, Rachel, Stephen, Nina. Such a great team to work with, and it shows in the final output. It's a great looking publication and a really good, well put together report.
Thanks. Ashley, do you want to pick up finally on the comms work stream?
Absolutely. So we have a concrete deliverable to really focus on amplifying the voices of this community in a way that raises brand awareness about the community, but also to encourage individual and organizational membership signups for CTW. So we're going to be working on getting some assets out to you guys and making it super simple for you to share with your networks if you'd like to do so, specifically talking about why you join this group, why you keep coming back to these calls, and what value you get out of this community. So you might see Mark or I or someone else reaching out to kind of better understand what your experience has been with CTW. And we'd love to have you, we'd encourage you to promote what we've got moving down the pipeline to your individual LinkedIn networks if you so choose.
Excellent. Thanks, Ashley. And thanks again, Mark. Just want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're at the top of the hour. If you haven't signed up, I think everyone who's on has signed up as an individual member. We're strongly encouraging people to also sign up as an organizational member. Barry and Tom Matthews have been working really hard in getting the directory to a point that we expect this month we'll have that out there for everyone to be able to have access and do the simple searches of, to get a sense of who's out there and what platforms are out there. So we're excited for that as a next step to be coming forward for everyone. So I just thank everyone for your engagement. If you have thoughts, ideas, if you have topics that you want to bring up in these calls, let us know, and Brandon and I will work to make sure we give you an opportunity to get it out there. So thanks all. Yeah, and to Mark and Anant's note, Barry, you got to go get John out for a beer.
I know, yeah, exactly. Gin and tonic.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jen and Mark, great job, man. I definitely agree with you, Mark, that this is a great example of collaboration. And Jen, every time I see the work, I'm just so impressed, you know, how far the labs come and the depth of stuff. It really makes our job a lot easier when you guys do such great deep work, you know, and we can take it out there and try to commercialize some of the stuff and share the wisdom that you guys have gained. So, and Balaji, I'm definitely going for gin and tonic right now.
Yeah,
it is. It's the theme of the day. You have to get a gin and tonic for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.